Hello, it's Martha Novak, and this is a show called Real Talk with Martha Novak. We're talking about something really important to talk about today, which is motivation, or as I said in the description, the lack thereof, and how to get going and why it's important to do so. So that's today's show. It's a live show. If you have anything you'd like to say to me, you can call in at 347-850-1647. Otherwise, I'm going to push on. Pardon me. We have things growing up here in the woods that I get a little sniffy about. Guys, motivation's a tricky subject because everybody wants it for their field. You understand? So there's business motivation studies, there's educational motivation studies, there are motivational studies, athletic motivational studies. You could just go on and on. That's not what I'm talking about today. What I am, hi, yes, hello, Peter. It's very nice to see you too. I'm so glad that you're tuning in today. For those of you on Blog Talk Radio, when I speak to my friends on Facebook Live, they're writing me, and I'm so delighted that you are, and it's very nice to be in touch again. Yes, it's been a very, very busy time, and I have stepped away for a couple of weeks because I had some cousins that I never met come to town. It was very nice. These are the closest cousins that I have, and we found each other, believe it or not, on Ancestry. Or no, I think it was 23andMe. But anyway, putting the whole family puzzle together has been fascinating. And Michelle, so nice to see you too. Good morning to all. Okay, so what the thing I'm saying here is there are so many different scientific, because this is an important subject to people getting going, right? Scientific studies, psychological studies on motivation in specific fields. I'm not talking about that today. I'm talking about general motivation and what's going on energetically. You remember that what we do here is energy psychology. We talk about energy and where the energy is going. And I have quite a different idea about motivation than some people are saying. So I'm going to try to simplify this very complicated subject for all of us, especially for me, okay? So let's do a prayer, getting us all on the same page, and then we launch in and talk about motivation and more specifically the lack of it and what we can do about that, okay? Dear God, who is all there is, you who are all we are, and all everything is in this world, we thank you so much for our being here together, for our work we do under the banner of knowing ourselves and knowing you, which are the same thing more, for we are all the aspects of your light. We are often confused in this wacky world. We go in and out of it from time to time. This is natural. We must learn to tolerate a little more uncertainty because this is more and more an uncertain world. But we do know with all our hearts, and whether we know this or whether we want to believe this, the direction we're going is to absolutely know that you're there in the middle of all the chaos and that we are who we are, and it's not an accident that we have you as our security inside, guiding us, helping us negotiate through this very confusing and complicated world. We're at peace on a deeper level because of all this. And we listen for your guidance through this show and other things that may happen to us during the week. We are very grateful, and we say now, we know nothing, and say it gladly, for it is the you through us and through all things that know it all. The answers are right here for us when we're ready and when it's time. We open to that now, and so it is. Amen. Okay, kids, let's go to work. So let's first talk about what motivation is. Psychology defines motivation as the process by which activities are started, directed, and, here's an important word, sustained so that certain needs are met. Well, hello, Barbara. Thank you. Barbara says she's ready and open. And hey, Kat, perfect. So good to see all of you. I'm so glad to talk to my dear friends. This means a lot to me that you all tune in. I love you. Okay, so let me repeat this. Psychologists define motivation as the process by which activities are started, directed, and sustained so that certain needs are met. Well, that's all well and good. I want to talk with you now, really for the body of the show, about what I see most often that are the blocks to true motivation. You remember, motivation, like everything else in life, has a duality. It can be motivated, motivation can be motivated from the highest self mind or from the ego child's mind. Often, you get a very undesirable response when you are motivated from this egoic child's mind. It's because you are presenting yourself like a child, and with all the childish adjectives sometimes that go along with it, like anger, like frustration, like not believing you're going to get what you want, believing nobody cares about you. I mean, these are not on the surface. These are not things that people go through life talking about at cocktail parties, right? And yet, there are two issues that every issue falls under. And one is, you don't care about me. And the second is, I never get what I want. If those things are attached and present in the ego child's mind, and they're prevalent there, and you are talking from that, Spirit is going to show you you're talking from that by having a response that is not optimal from your fellow man. So what does that mean to you? That means that we've got to be more aware of what we're motivated from. The fact of the matter is, it isn't what we say and what we do that's of vital importance. Is that shocking? It shouldn't be, because it is your motivation to say and do that's really the important thing, because it speaks to who you are. It speaks to your character, and it speaks to your consciousness at that moment in time. Good morning, Dorothy. Oh, I'm so delighted that you're with us this morning. It's so nice to be back on the air. I mean, it was wonderful to take some time off and meet these cousins and experience that, because had you talked to me even 2 years ago, I would have told you that all my family was passed away, and now I found family. It's just wonderful. I get thrilled that my dear friends say, "Good God, you've got more cousins than anybody I know." I actually don't. I just talk about them a lot because I'm so thrilled to have them, you know. All right. And we wouldn't have them at any other time in our lives. Here is Ancestry.com and 23andMe. Oh my gosh, it's linking people that would never be linked, you know. These cousins were from Denver, Colorado. How in the world would I ever meet these cousins from Denver, Colorado, except through these sites, you know? They were kind enough to fly in. All right. I want to talk about some general motivational things before I put my 2 cents worth in, but you know that's what I'll do in this show. Psychologists also say that motivation is understood as forces acting within the individual. I do believe that's true. These things whether you're motivated, whether you're not motivated, they come from inside you. The nice thing is everything is changeable, but here's the thing, and this is true of deepening consciousness itself. You'll know when you have drilled so far down, you've hit the bottom line. Only then does the energy change. How does the energy change? Well, it's not fixated on that belief or that issue anymore. It's freed that energy into the higher realms of you. What happens to that energy? Well, you think higher thoughts, you perform and are motivated by higher and more loving and altruistic sometimes, if it's high enough, energies. Oh, wait a minute, you can't have that. What do you think you're doing? No. I'm sorry, I have a cat that thinks he is going to take my string. And as you all know that have cats, sometimes cats will find that enormously interesting to do and swallow and swallow and swallow and swallow and get choked. Not good to leave that kind of thing out, and it was sticking out of my book. All right. So, psychology also tells us that different mental states, I say different emotional states primarily. Oh, hello, Sheila. Hi. Thank you, Dorothy. You're very sweet. Different mental and emotional states can compete with each other. It's what I've said all along about your emotional body. The emotional body contains all sorts of contradictions. That's why when you get a real cerebral person, they just cannot understand the concept of you can say, I want an intimate partner, and I don't want an intimate partner. You can have both those things in the emotional body. Now, my job is to then remove, challenge you, and change the energy so that you get what you do want and not really what you don't want out of fear. In other words, it's about challenging the ego, child's mind, body, which is the fear-based self, and removing those issues that are not in keeping with your ascended self. And that's why, ultimately, you wake up, because we're releasing the energy out of the emotional body, and it transfers to the spiritual body, and you wake up. You think more globally. You think more deeply. You understand what's motivating you. Okay, that said, so these different states compete with each other sometimes, and the strongest state determines behavior, psychology says. It's the same thing that we're saying here. I'm saying that if you want a deep and powerful, real relationship with someone, and yet you spend the majority of your time fantasizing about it instead of getting out there and meeting people and going through the process of dating, that's a competition. And because fantasy is all of our heroines, it is our heroine. Fantasy hits the opiate centers of the brain. It feels good. If you don't challenge that, if you don't get that out of the way, you're just going to get more and more fantasy. You understand? Whatever the strongest energy is, wins. That's what psychology is saying. And that's why it's so important to know yourself, know what's motivating you, wake up to how you're spending your time and energy, stop the negative thoughts, all of the things that we talk about on every radio show in one way or another pertains to motivation. Another thing is we can be motivated to do something without actually doing it. That's what psychology says. I call that fantasy. I'm going to, I was put in mind of something that someone said to me one time. They invited a friend over to their house. I happened to know this person that they invited. I knew she was strongly in mania, strongly in fantasy. And it was really interesting to hear my friend's take on the dinner party, because they said she was filled with plans. And yet when they tried to pin her down to plans, to actual step by step by step by step, a real plan, not just plans, she didn't have a clue. She couldn't do it. She looked confused. Ladies and gentlemen, that's fantasy. That's mania. Nobody wants to be challenged out of that, by the way, because it's heroin. Many times people feel that that helps them put one foot in front of another. If that's you, my darlings, you're no different from a lot of other people. But you're listening to this show, and you're going to have to challenge that, because fantasy has its own reward, and you're not going to get anything out of that but more fantasy. And if you want reality, you're going to have to make your peace with reality and find out that reality is very good and it's malleable according to the way you think and feel. It's about now emotionally growing up and being motivated, by the way, by the right things. And I don't mean that in a right and wrong sense. I mean certainly motivated optimally to get what you want. You're creating this life of yours, after all. Okay. So, from my point of view, what you say and do and what you feel is not nearly as important as why you say and do and feel what you do. That's why we're talking about this today. Now, emotion is tied into this, certainly, because emotions function as a type of motive, don't they? The problem is when people are highly emotional people, and when people have really relied on fantasy a lot, they give emotion way too much credence. And this is what I mean. Emotion, let's say you go into a party and you feel anxious. Okay? Let's just say that. That's an example. It's a signpost. It's there like a street sign saying, you're feeling anxious. And you're supposed to note that. I'm feeling anxious. And then most people run away from the party or put on a pretense that they're comfortable or a lot of other things, but they don't do the one thing that all of you ought to do who are studying consciousness, which is ask yourself, what's motivating my anxiety? What the hell is this about? Why? Why are you anxious? Most of the time it has to do with our childhood. Oh, yes, there can be physical symptoms too, by the way. If you trying to fall asleep at night and you are anxious, you might want to ask yourself, for example, how much water you've had in the day, because severe dehydration, particularly as you're getting older, causes you to have a cellular anxiety because your body is mostly water. You're depriving your organs, glands, and systems, your eyes, which are the inside of your eyes are nothing but viscosity. For God's sake, you're depriving yourself and your body's just signaling, you didn't drink enough water today, be sure and drink it tomorrow. You're dehydrated. I can't function well. So there are all sorts of kinds of anxiety. You've got physical anxiety, you've got mental anxiety, you've got emotional anxiety. You can even have spiritual anxiety, which is your energy going in the wrong direction, right? When your energy goes into the wrong direction, when you're thinking thoughts like that support an ego, child's mind direction, let me tell you, your dear body is going to give you anxiety about it. All right, so the problem with somebody that is in this emotional state without the element of consciousness that says, look deeper, here's a sign, look deeper. The thing that happens is people believe their emotions, don't they? They believe their emotions. They dither. By the way, if you dither, should I take that? Should I do this? Should I do this? Should I do this? This would be good. I don't know. When you're doing that about packing a suitcase or about selling your house, you're in the wrong mind. Because dithering just tells you you're in the egoic child's mind, guys. That's all. And that emotion, that drama that you create is part of your past and usually part of what your family did. And it can be shown externally or you can keep it all inside. It can be very covert and you're just doing that within. Nevertheless, if you're doing that, you're stopping yourself from moving forward. It's a game you play with yourself that you must challenge because it's time to do so now. And again, I want to say, in terms of fantasy, I hear people from time to time who feel like they're very spiritual people, and they're trying to be, say, oh, I saw this, it was a sign. Well, everything's a sign and nothing's a sign. It depends on what mind you're in. First of all, I'm going to tell you, if you're in your highest self mind, you don't need external signs. You really don't. They all come from within. Once in a while, yes, they'll come from without. I remember years ago, I walked outside my house, and there was a wall right to my left, and there was this beautiful, adorable little frog sitting on my wall, just right at eye level. So I sat down on the step, and I said, well, this really is odd. Is there something that you want to tell me? And the frog said, be careful. Be careful. It meant nothing to me, be careful. I said, thank you so much. And went on. And I think it was 2 days later, I wasn't careful. And I broke my foot. I broke my foot. I was reading a book. I stepped on a step. I didn't step firmly on the step. Too much weight went on the little toe of my right foot, and the what they call it, the ballerina bone or something, the outside bone. And sure enough, it broke like a toothpick, which was good for me to see. My bones were brittle, because that was the first time that ever happened. And, that was certainly some information for me that I ignored. Most of the time, though, if we will give time and attention to ourselves, information comes from within. Certainly, these days, most of it comes from within, and that's the only thing I really believe when God tells me something about the world or about me or about where to go and what to do. Okay. This whole idea about, oh, send me a sign and something comes and anything can be interpreted anyway. Guys, the whole thing about energy is the answers are inside you. And I need for you to work on yourself to the extent that you know all the answers are inside of you. That's what deeper level of consciousness does. It gets you to trust you. That's how when we're in session together and I pick up something and somebody argues with me, we need to talk about it because I know what I'm getting. And finally, their minds will open and they'll go, oh yeah, okay. I've never not had that happen. Now that's not Martha's brain. I'm not smart enough to do that. But Spirit is. And we're all channels for either the ego, child's mind, self, or the highest self. Okay. Now, motivation, and this is what we're talking about, but I'm going to give you some of the psychological terms, can either be intrinsic, if the activity is desired because it is inherently interesting or enjoyable or part of your talents, or extrinsic, if individual's goals is an external reward distinct from the activity itself. Science has found, all sorts of studies have shown that intrinsic motivation is far more beneficial than extrinsic. It's also not only the difference between the ego, child's mind, extrinsic, who wants validation from out there, and the highest self mind, which has it come from within. But it's also the difference, once you are pursuing the activities, between what is pleasurable and what is gratifying. When we were all in school, and we just learned something because we wanted to pass a test or impress our teachers or whatever we did, we forgot that information almost immediately, and we certainly were not masters of it. It was just pleasurable. We got an A, or as close to it as we could get. But the most powerful thing is when you use you. It's very gratifying. So gratification is really what I want to encourage you all to do, because pleasurable things are fleeting. For example, we can see a beautiful sunset and we can be enormously moved, but as soon as that sunset is gone, we're on to the next thing. We're gone. Because it was a pleasurable activity, not a gratifying one. But you write a damn good short story or something you're really proud of. Now you know what I'm talking about. You create a garden. You create a fabulous dinner that nobody else has ever seen before. You take a recipe and you make it your own. All of that and much more is very gratifying. That's why the arts is so important. Particularly if you're interested in creative endeavors and spiritual endeavors, the arts are very important for you to enjoy and for you to participate in. Pleasure and gratification. I think an ideal life has both of them, but more in the gratification side. And I read an interesting article. This is slightly off the subject from motivation, but I thought it was fascinating because they were saying, why do narcissists lose interest in you so quickly? You know why? The article went on to say, it's what we're talking about right now. They want the momentary fix. They want the pleasure of feeling great. They want you to say they're great. That's pleasurable. That's not gratifying. So they have to constantly get that fix over and over again because there's no gratification there. And even if an activity was potentially gratifying, you're making it pleasurable instead. They don't go down to those deeper levels, you see? I thought that was a pretty damn good, interesting article. All right, now, that's the general stuff I have to tell you about motivation, but let's go into some of the things that I've observed in my life as we work. I think that it's extremely important to know yourself better, because it brings yourself because it brings you into alignment with realistic goals. There are many factors, some of which I'll mention here, but many more that I won't mention because I mentioned them in other shows, that make you you. You've got to know you. So many people are walking around in this world without a strong sense of self. Now, what do I mean by that? Have you ever thought about this? Because actors do think about this, and that's where I came from, so here we are. But you think about you in relation to picking up the mouse, you in relation to picking up the cup of tea and drinking a sip of tea, you in relationship to fixing your hair, holding the brush, you in relationship to things. However, in families where you were neglected or abused, where you had to placate parents, where you had become the adult, where you had to clean to keep your sanity or anything else, we become separated from that sense of self. Oh, it doesn't go anywhere. It's just buried deeply inside you. And of course, consciousness is about going down and getting that real authentic person and bringing that forth. That's one of the reasons that I say know what your values are, because that's a real easy way to start it. If you choose 3 values that you already are, and you make sure that whatever interaction you're in, those values go with you, that's a real good way to hold on to you when you are inclined to abandon yourself, because you've been trained to do so. And then you add other values and you hold on to them in situations. And pretty soon, you might be all back together. Who ever heard of that? Okay. When I say knowing yourself better brings you into alignment with your realistic goals, first of all, they're realistic. You've come out of fantasy. You've challenged that. And it's not easy, I'm going to tell you, because people don't like their fantasy challenged. I always have to hit it, and then I go away to another subject and I have to come back and hit it some more, because you just will not let go of that. I have to chip away at it. You know? Again, sometimes it's the reason we put one foot in front of another. The problem is it's damaging in the long run, because you can't create from fantasy. It's not like having a vision. It's not like a desire that you can bring forth in reality. Okay. Going back to the sentence, you bring yourself into alignment with your realistic goals. Do you realize the only way you can create something is if your higher self and your ego child's mind are in alignment? They must agree. But in psychology and in my energy work, I'm going to tell you, most of the time your higher self does not agree with the ego child's mind. Just like the example I gave you before. I want a partner. I don't want a partner. I saw what partnership was like in my early childhood home. I don't want that. It never occurs to you that you can create a new model for love. And that's what every successful couple, by the way, every unsuccessful couple does. We're all creating a new model of love in our relationships, you see. How nice if we're creating one from the highest self. So the desires of your higher self and the desires of the ego experience must be brought into alignment. You must want the same things. That means you've got to challenge the ego child's mind, which contains all the hate and envy and negativity and things that we were all raised with, the blame and the shame, and the list goes on. We've got to challenge those things. They are not valid anymore. The past is over, except for your dragging it like an old dead mule and putting it in the middle of your beautiful living room. For God's sake, it's over. It's over. For everyone but you. For every part of you except the emotional body. So these things have to be resolved. They have to be resolved. And the irony about the work we do is that we have to talk about this. I have to do my energy work on you. We resolve these things. We put the past in a more global perspective. We show, how it really was instead of how it is in the child's mind. Mother was a villain, dad was a saint, or vice versa. And then when you get to a place where you know everything about you, you know what the message is? Put the story down. Has no energy anymore. Create your life now. Now, right now, all the energy is back. It's in the creative body. Go and manifest. Go and create. Go paint something beautiful. Or write something moving. Go. Bring out that authentic self. And make other people feel good about the journey that we're all on. But we're either choosing it consciously or we're just kind of muddling through the best way we know how. Good for you for choosing it consciously. All right, with that said, I want to talk about being lazy, the concept of lazy. In my book, there's absolutely no such thing. And I would suggest that you throw that word out of your vocabulary because nobody is lazy. There's not a lazy bone in anybody's body. I don't care what they're doing and how they look. What you mean by lazy is that the energy is going in a different direction than you want it to go. If you want to go forward and the energy is taking a nice dog leg to the left and doing something else, that's not lazy. You're over there, according to your beliefs and your habits and what you surmise about life. I want you to think in terms of energy, not in terms of these catchwords that society uses when they don't really understand what's going on. And the interesting thing about this is it's always about somebody not looking and seeing what the energy is doing. So a nice word going on the top, somebody is lazy, doesn't. It just means somebody's not doing what you think they ought to do. A little narcissism in there too, by the way. A little vilification if it's you. Nobody responds to that kind of force well, particularly you to you. So I want to take that off the table. The whole power of finding why you're not motivated is to find out where the energy is going. What are the beliefs? I'm going to tell you, truly, there isn't an ego child's mind that doesn't have a sense of futility. How's that for motivation? You're either going to drown it or you're going to overcompensate because it's there. Whole point is to transcend the ego child's mind. Right? Let's resolve that. Let's see, let's take the energy away from the word futility. Let's just talk about the past. Let's resolve all that, because let me tell you, your parents chose to live the life they did. Happy, sad, miserable, damaging as hell, whatever happened in the past, they chose it. They chose it because of their issues and because that was what they were supposed to do. Shakespeare said all the world's a stage and all the men and women merely players. Absolutely. There's something going on beyond what everybody thinks and sees as going on. So if we're on this path, We've got to look differently at all that, and sometimes that takes a few years, doesn't it? You see the story clearly when you dive into it, and when you really see it. See, the problem here is, one of the reasons people self-loathe is not because they're looking at themselves, but because they're assuming and not looking at themselves. They're carrying the burden of the family. I was lecturing on a scapegoat the other day. The scapegoat is there to take all the shame of the family on. They willingly do it, and they get the result of that. Why? One of the reasons why is, in my book, a lot of people who come to me are very spiritually oriented, and they think emotionally they're not going to be as jumped on if they just go on and say they did it and take all the blame and shame and guilt of the family. But another reason they do it is to survive. If they can placate all that, they're going to survive. But let me tell you, to be able to do that, there is a very strong abandonment of self. And if you're going to get over that, that self has got to come back. All right. Some other things for you to know about how you're wired. I mean, there are many things. Guys, certainly investigate Myers-Briggs, certainly investigate DISC, as much as you can find out about yourself. By all means do. One of the things that I think is a real obvious one is whether you're an extrovert or an introvert. Now, I may look like an extrovert to you as I sit here and do this because I genuinely love people and animals and nature and everything. However, I am a big introvert, and the reason that I am is it is how you get energy. That's what introvert-extrovert means. Do you get energy from other people? If so, you're an extrovert. Do you get energy from being alone? If you do, you're an introvert. It's a sliding scale, let's say from 0 to 10, introvertism being 0, and extrovertism being 10, and most people, I think, are somewhere in the middle. So you've got to know yourself enough to know whether you want to sincerely go out and be with people, or is this a time to be alone? One of the issues in life, though, is isolation and withdrawal when you are in your ego child's mind. So if that's your motivation, it's a poor one. A lot of people go out and would rather be with other people and judge them and analyze them and talk behind their back. That's not true extrovertism. That's an issue as well. So who are you at your nature? And you've got to learn to not only find out what you are, and it's a finding out every minute of every day, considering yourself, right? I'm not talking about being selfish. I'm talking about the consideration of yourself. How you're going to take care of yourself if you're not considered. It's like you become, in fact you do, become the beneficent parent to yourself ultimately. What do you want to do, child, in this moment? What would make you happy? Learning something, creating something, growing something, eating something? What would it be? Okay. Introvertism and extrovertism leads me to another thought, which is something that is completely intrinsic to our program. It's called the Learning and Communication Sequence. I observed this years ago because I have always, when I was a child, sought energy. And I saw 3 parts of the brain, because this is based on the triunal brain system, 3 parts of the brain firing in a certain order. There is the reasoner aspect, which is housed here in the cerebral cortex. It's the part of us that thinks linearly, we plan ahead. It's a logic where one thought follows another. Another aspect, not necessarily the second one, but another aspect is the feeler aspect. It's housed down here in the amygdala where emotion is. And it is most seen not in the head, but in the nervous system, you know. If I said to you, just to compare these two, if I said, I don't understand what you're saying to me, this would be activated. I would be the reasoner I am. But if I say, I don't understand, it's the nervous system that's activated. It comes from a different place, you see. And then the third aspect is the mover aspect. The mover aspect is the part of you that commits to action physically. This is not somebody who just moves. This is somebody who commits to action physically as a response. Sylvester Stallone is this. If you watch him receive information in any of his Rockies, he created Rocky because it's the same LCS. He receives information and he goes, you know, he might receive it in his neck. There's always a physical response to getting things, right? His muscles tense. Okay. So you are a combination of these three. Everybody's different, though. You could be somebody who's a reigning feeler, which means you're a feeler first, and then a reasoner and a mover, or a reigning feeler with a mover and a reasoner. You got to know what you are. We have a test in our company that will show you what you are, and then you can have a consultation, which we always insist on. You're buying the test and the consultation with one of our people because your chart needs to be interpreted. You don't want to interpret it yourself. I remember years ago I learned this lesson the hard way. I was working with this company that was just a marvelous creative company. It was a woman who owned an interior design company. And this was in the early days of my fooling around with this, so I created this kind of little chart for her. It was before I had a test that was in any way definitive. And I created this little chart for her and sent it to her, and she, when I had a meeting with her, she was off the deep end. This proves I'm stupid, she said. It didn't prove she was stupid at all. I'm not testing your IQ. I'm testing how fast your brain responds to each of these stimuli. You understand? All right. Now, let's talk about something, introvertism and extrovertism. I am a very strong reasoner feeler. Those two aspects are pretty high, but I'm a very low mover. I've never been physically blessed. I'm not particularly strong. I am clumsy. Oddly enough, I was an actor who was in musicals. My little body's small. I look like Eliza Doolittle, Molly Brown, Annie Get Your Gun, all those things. So I had to dance from time to time. And if you watched me, you'd see my movers last. I'm no Baryshnikov. I'm no Fred Astaire or Michael Jackson or any of those people. I'm clumsier. Okay. So everybody says, you need exercise. You need exercise. But I don't like to exercise. And I don't like to go to classes where everybody's exercising. Makes me feel terrible because I can't do all the things they do, nor do I want to. I don't want to socialize with everybody. I'm an introvert. You know what I used to do? I don't do it so much anymore because of time. But I love animals. I love animals. And I would walk the dog. But what really would satisfy me, because I never did have a lot of access to horses, and horses are really fascinating to me, is I would go on horseback rides. Now, I wasn't doing that to control the horse. I wasn't doing that for my thighs. I wasn't doing that for any reason except to commune with the horse. And so I'd trick myself into exercising by getting on the horse because I enjoyed that aspect, you see. I will occasionally trick myself into exercising by planting pretty flowers. I'm not, at my age, going to be digging a huge hole. I don't think I ever dug a huge hole. I always had somebody helping me with that when I had a great big plant to plant. But I'll get out there and I'll pull weeds. I'll do that kind of thing because I want it to look pretty and colorful. That's another way you fool yourself. So how well do you know yourself? If you don't know yourself at all, and there are people that absolutely do not, and I'm going to tell you, every personality test in the world is about 45 to 55% accurate, and let me tell you why. Because people don't know themselves, and they're answering incorrectly according to who they are. Now, our test is a learning and communication test. How you learn is also how you communicate until you get this information and you go, oh, everybody in the world is not like me. But let me tell you, that's not going to be accurate either if you don't know yourself to a certain extent. So I can look at you and see what you are. You can take the test and I get an idea of how far removed you are from yourself and the understanding of you. Okay. All right. Let's talk about depression. Now, depression is a very complicated subject, by the way, like motivation. But I'm only going to talk about it relative to what I see in my work with people. Okay? Depression occurs when you are not owning, not acknowledging, not owning emotion. That's one way. When you are not acknowledging, not owning talent. Another way. If you are a very emotional person and you squelch yourself, if you are a very talented person and you squelch yourself, how in the world do you think you're going to escape depression? You aren't. And one of the ways that we perpetuate depression, because we're always perpetuating our own issues until we stop, is because we do the same routine over and over and over and over again. Depression is really insidious. I'll tell you why it's insidious. It's like if you take a piece of paper and a pen and you rub the pen back and forth over the same line, and you feel it, you're going to feel a rut. Depression is a rut. Problem is, with a rut, you don't have the energy to get out of the rut, and yet depression is demanding that you do. Depression is some sort of non-movement, mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, or all of them, depending on how big the depression. You must move. One of my favorite expressions, one of my favorite definitions of God. Oh, hello. This is, what happened here? All right. Something happened to our session here on Blog Talk Radio. Yeah, I hope you're listening a different way. That's all I can say. Let's go to the studio and see what happens there. Okay, we're still going. One of my definitions that I really love of God is an infinite and ever-expanding set of truths, always in motion. Guys, in motion. You got to be moving to experience God. You're experiencing God in your stuckness, but you're experiencing the ego child's mind stuckness, belief in your limitations. Oh, we all have limitations, but I'm talking about, these are kind of some made-up limitations. My friend Barbara Rubin, oh, I love you, darling, said, movers of the world unite. She's a mover, big time. And she's marvelous. Man, what she can do with a bicycle never even occurred to me, Staying on it is important for me, and that's about all I can do. Turning corners is a challenge. Okay. God is an infinite, ever-expanding set of truths. I like to think these truths are deepening in all of us, because that's what the awakening of consciousness is. But in motion, we must move. Mentally, we've got to think new thoughts. Emotionally, we've got to think new feelings and expand our emotional vocabulary so we can, call it what we feel. Physically, we've got to do new things. That doesn't mean get out and exercise necessarily. It means go take a painting class. Go take an acting class. Go take a gardening class. Go take a cooking class. Get your camera out. Go out into the woods and take some pictures. Move. And spiritually, we have to start opening our mind to new spiritual thought. You remember, I think it was Oldsmobile that had the advertisement of one of their cars, of course they're out of business now, that said, this is not your father's Oldsmobile. Okay? Well, this isn't your dad's world either. Things are changing. Things are changing quickly. We need the authentic you. There's a reason you're here. The reason we have these existentialist questions like, why am I here, is because we don't know ourselves. We have abandoned that self, and that self is the reason you're here. Something is coming forth in you, whether it's rearing a good family or helping people in some way, bringing forth a creative idea into the world. It can be all sorts of things. There are reasons for you to be here. But you got to find you before you find those reasons. You cannot put your spiritual purpose ahead of who you are. It doesn't work that way, because it must come through who you are at your authentic level. Okay. One more thought about motivation and depression. And that is, do keep in mind, look for the non-movement if you feel stuck. If you feel depressed, somewhere along the line you're doing one of two things. You're not moving, and number two, you've abandoned you in some aspect, in some way. And you may be doing both those things. So instead of just going, I'm depressed, and reaching for the bottle of wine or the beer, ask yourself why and find out. Let's fix that. Let's get moving. Moving's the answer in some aspect. Or in all aspects, quite frankly. Now, motivation is tricky. It's a tricky subject. And here's why it's tricky. Because, number one, you have to start something. And you might even have to initiate something. And two, you have to sustain it. Whoa. There are a lot of people that will start something, not necessarily initiate it, but start something, and then it falls through. Start something, they let it go. They can't keep the momentum up. The whole point is for you to do this every day, to keep the momentum up. You know, I was sharing with you that my cousins came, and we all said one of the things we liked about all of us is that everybody was doing something. My husband's building a boat in the basement. I've just finished my 3rd book. Other cousins are very involved in their work. Oh, what have I done to my hair? Whoa! We're all doing something. Guys, that's the key to a happy life, is not to say, well, you know, I'm this age, I don't have anything else to do. Who wants to hear from me? You've got to work that out earlier, so you keep doing things and putting things out there for the rest of your life. It keeps you young. Maybe not in the way we look, but certainly in your very being. Starting, initiating, and maintaining has a lot to do with your learning and communication sequence. Because what you choose to do has to do with your predilections in the mental body. I'm interested in words. My husband is interested in building. You see? So those things turn us on. He wouldn't be turned on if he had to sit at a computer and write a novel. I wouldn't know where to start to build a boat, even with plans. So, starting is what interests us. We could be interested in movement. I mean, look at my darling Barbara, who gets on her bicycle and goes interesting places and has a marvelous time with that. But what keeps her on that bicycle and keeps her looking forward to the next trip, what keeps me writing, is the emotional body. That's where passion is. If you don't feel passion, either you don't know yourself well enough, or you've got more emotional content to bring forth. One of the things I always say that's a good emotional exercise, if you have been, I came from a family that didn't talk about much emotion. I had to learn it as an adult. And one of the ways I always recommend people do is to go to the internet, look up list of emotions, choose the longest one, and print it out. And when you're just sitting around, choose the words that match that emotion of just sitting around, because everything has an emotional moment at its base. We simply are not sensitive enough to realize that. Actors know that, though. Even the word yes that a character might say is motivated emotionally by something. And you can see when an actor hasn't made a decision like that and isn't bringing that forth. So let me tell you, every single thing you say and do is motivated by an emotional moment. What happens when that's stunted? What happens when that's dampened? Well, if enough of it is, there goes your passion. Okay. Guys, it's right there for you to get again. We just have to do some work on ourselves, okay? All right. Keep in mind, one of the things that happens when you are stuck for whatever reason is that you will create fantasy to convince yourself you're moving. we intrinsically know we should be moving. And so fantasy convinces ourselves that we're moving when we're not. It's an idea we entertain in our heads. You know? I remember I gave an exercise to one of my clients years ago. I think it was an actor. And I was trying to raise his cellular energy so he would be more visible on the stage. And he fell behind everybody else in class. And I said, what's going on here, you know? And I said, are you doing the exercise I gave you to raise your cellular energy? And he said, oh, yes, I'm doing that. I said, how are you doing? He said, I think about it every day. You're not using your body? No, I think about it. Nope, ain't gonna work. Your mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual bodies, spiritual body being the energetic body, all work in conjunction. When all four of those bodies get the highest self and are there all the time, boy, let me tell you, that's when consciousness awakens big time. That's when enlightenment occurs, when you're there all the time. But this isn't something, you see, a lot of times people just entertain an idea. Hello, I just have all these ads pop up. A lot of times people entertain the idea of doing something without actually doing it. The mental body is the part that holds the idea. You see, and they can go to the mental body and they can say, well, I'm going to do that as soon as I do this. And the interesting thing about the mental body is it doesn't challenge you at all. You don't have to put anything on the line. You just have to go think about it. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to invest your money or your time. You don't have to fall in love with the project. You can't just keep things in one body and be happy. Can't keep everything in the emotional body either. You're a mess if you do. You've got to have balance in all four of your bodies. All right, moving along. I have a kitty that's going to try to walk in front of this camera. All right, next point. When we're talking about motivation, what I often see is the dependent personality disorder. You can read about this on the internet. It's in your DSM. The dependent personality disorder is someone who invests their energy in being a child. Now, they may not pretend. They may pretend they're not a child, but when you start peeling back the layers, they very much identify themselves as the child. They can't initiate projects, for example. They don't initiate projects by themselves. They always have to have a partner if they initiate at all. It's like somebody needs to be there to validate them. And here's the interesting thing about this. Often they don't need anybody. They're enormously creative individuals, and yet they're not going to step up, you see. They believe they can't create something alone, travel alone. Guys, you can. And it's the dependent personality that needs to be challenged. Not dropping these things that you could contribute to your life and to the world. Do keep in mind that a big part of your happiness is what I have mentioned to you before, gratification. I want you to have pleasure in your life too, but you keep in mind the difference between pleasure and gratification. Gratification is deep and it is sustaining. It's sustaining. It's using your talents, your gifts, and your abilities to create something wonderful for yourself. Okay, guys, I'm going to stop there. I've had a wonderful time talking to you today. I will be here next week. I'm not going anywhere for a while, okay? So I will be here next week with another show. What it is, I don't know right now. But thank you so much for listening. I am delighted that we're back together and doing this on Sunday mornings. You certainly can help me a lot by, there we have a caller. At least I think it's a caller. I don't know. The 917, if you're a caller, please stay on the line and I'll come to you in just a minute. Guys, you certainly do a lot for me and for the show by sending these shows around on social media and by talking to your friends about these shows so that we are building our conscious community. That means a lot to me, and we're certainly trying to increase our numbers. So if you'll keep doing that, I will be very, very grateful. And I will be doing these shows every Sunday for a while, anyway, until I have to travel. All right, let's see if we can go to this 917 caller. Sometimes when I don't see a hold time, there's no one on the line. Hello, is there someone there? Hi, this is Martha Novak. Are you there? Well, okay, I don't think we are. Okay, I think sometimes people call into this number thinking that they can listen in. You keep in mind that to listen in, all you have to do is go to my website, which is marthanovak.com, under radio shows, and you can punch a button and listen, but you won't have to be on the air. Okay, guys, thank you so much for everything. Let's do a quick prayer and sum all this up for you, all right? Thank you, Kat. Dear God, thank you so much for our being together today to talk about this important subject. We open ourselves to see, hear, sense, and know what you would have us do as our next step as we move with this information in our minds and hearts out into life. We ask that we be aware of what we're doing and how to make ourselves happy in the moment, what we need to do to move, and who we really are on a deeper level that propels it all. We do all have a purpose for being here. Open us to that. And if not to that, if we're not ready for the full picture yet, help us see the next step and the next step and the next step and the next step. And we open to be told and shown those things. Thank you, dear God, for all of this. We say this prayer, in spite of the barking dog, in your name, in the name of the Ascended Masters, our love-centered guides and friends, and in the name of each and every person listening to this show. Thank you so much. And so it is. Amen. Thank you, guys. So glad to be with you today. I'll see you next week, okay? Take care now, and stay well and healthy out there. And put some of this to use in your lives.